Unit 5, Chapter 14, Contemporary Gospel. This is the chapter that a lot of you have been really waiting for, along with the chapter on playing by ear. We're going to cover the contemporary gospel examples that are written in the book, but then when we get to the next unit, we're going to go more extensively into the songs that you hear on the radio and things of that nature, how you embellish your chords and with these contemporary voicings and things like that. That's what a lot of people are like, oh, I really want to know what's going on there. And it's funny because those who are now playing contemporary gospel have, I find that they have somewhat of difficulty playing the traditional styles. They're two separate but similar styles. So that's why I said if you can learn the foundation of gospel music, you'll be able to do both styles, the contemporary as well as the traditional styles. Let's talk about the contemporary gospel styles, starting at page 73 in volume 1. The contemporary style is produced by extensive use of the 9th, 11th, and 13th chords. Even that sounds frightening to a lot of people. When you talk about the 13th chords or the tritone substitutions and things like that, it's like, oh my goodness, what are you talking about? Well, we're going to discuss that so you can know what's going on basically, and you can use this in any form. Now, and be careful as you're combining the styles, but it's okay to experiment, but with some forms of taste and reservation. You just want to consider the style, the place, the location, and things of that nature. Example 100A is kind of a basic progression, and then we're going to go the same progression, 100B, demonstrating the same progression, but with chord substitutions and variations, using the 2, 7, and 5, the 11th chords and things of that nature. Example 100A. When you go to 100B, notice that we go to the 1, to the 3, to the 6, 2, 7, 5, 11, rather than the 5, 7. So that's the difference here, the substitution. We're substituting one chord for another. There's the 5, 11. And 1, 9. You can use this one, 1 major 9, but that one is not as common in gospel. That's kind of more jazzy. Not that the 1, 9 and the 13th and the 5, 11 are not jazzy, but I'm just saying as an ending, you know, it's kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, but anyway. 1, 9 kind of fits a little better in my taste than the 1 major 9. The 5, 11 can be called a 4/5. So if you keep that in mind, a 4/5 in any key, if you go in the key of A flat, 2, 3, 4, you go to the 4 chord, which is D flat, go to the 5 chord, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4/5. That's an easy way to remember the 5, 11 chord. Any key, F, 2, 3, 4, which is B flat, is the 4. And 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4/5. So that one's a very important chord, very useful chord in contemporary gospel. You can use that in pop or a lot of things, R&B as well. 100C, we're going to start adding some other things to this. Rather than using the 5, 11, we're going to use the tritone substitution this time. See that? Tritone substitution is a half step above where you're going. So if I'm going to a C chord, that becomes a D flat chord. It's a half step to where you're trying to resolve, go a half step higher. See how that works? Now, if we go further, we can also substitute other chords. Notice in measure 2 of 100, example 100D, we have the 1 going to a 3 alternate chord. And this is a very common chord as well. I use a lot of these. Alternate 3 going to the 6, and then the 2/7 and a tritone substitution and a 1/9. See what happens there? So the tritone substitution and alternate chords, if you discuss that 100D measure by measure, measure 1 begins with a tonic, passing tones in the left hand. Measure 2, used chord, contemporary gospel and jazz. This chord may be called a 3 altered, or sometimes notice 3 plus 9 plus 5. So if you see that in your jazz charts, or your charts, 3 plus 9 plus 5, or it won't say 3, it'll say something like E plus 9 plus 5. That means there's an E chord with a raised 5th and a raised 9th, etc. So that's what happens there. Let's go to the next page, page 76. And you see the various voicings of that same chord. If we go down to page 76, example 102, see all these different substitutions? You can substitute all these chords and it's never ending. You just come up with some great sounds here. I just use the standard 2-5-1 as an ending. And these are progressions within a song. They're going and doing secondary dominance and things like that. Here we go, example 102B, page 77. Notice the left hand movement. You see what's happening in the left hand? Chromatic movement. And you could just play around with that forever. I mean, so feel free to play around and experiment with this. Page 78, example 104. Example 105A, we're getting a little more elaborate. This is how they're used in a song. Or you could go 5-11. Notice I have that open. Or you could use this. Example 105C. Let's take a look at this one. I'm just going on and adding different variations to give you an idea of the various alternatives that you have to use. Why did I do that in measure 1, 2, 3, 4 of 105C? Because I didn't want to go so quickly to the cadence, the final cadence. Remember, we want to go to door number 1, then door number 8, and door number 10, and everything before we get back to door number 1. So now I want to add something else. Deceptive. Chromaticism is used extensively in contemporary gospel, and this is one example. There's so many of them. This is 106A. So you start on the 6th. This is the key of A flat. Start on the 6th, second inversion. There Here's a 6 1, 5, 6, A flat, second inversion. Also, it may be used to descend from the subdominant to the tonic. For instance, in 106B, page 81, you could do the same thing there. There's that deceptive thing again. 511. See how that works? Example 107. Progression leads to the 4, to the 5, to the 1 cadence. Or voice it lower. See how that works there? Example 108. Example of, these are kind of crunch chords. See what happens there? Now, a lot of the contemporary songs, they sound really elaborate, and I'm going to tell on them a little bit. A lot of times they're basically, the whole song may be based on 2 chords, and it may be the 1 and the 4 or the 1 and the 5, and they just use crunch chords. I call them crunch chords. You just lower 1 note. You can kind of see that in example 108. See that crunch chord? And it's not called that, that's my term, crunch chord. There it is again. And I probably I don't like 7s so much. That's a personal preference. So, those crunch chords. Using crunch chords, those are very beneficial. They sound jazzy, they sound full, and they are used a lot in the contemporary gospel. Example 109, this may be used to end a song in a minor key or as a repetition chords in a bridge-like section. See what happens there? Same thing for 110. Now, the more you get into the contemporary, especially the Black Holiness churches, the keyboard players were very instrumental in these altered chords and augmented and the 13th and tritone substitution chords, adding these chords, whereas like I said, the Black Baptist churches were leaned towards the blues side of gospel. The holiness churches, Black holiness churches, their keyboard players added a lot of the jazz more jazz and embellishments, the 13th and altered and tritone substitution. So you hear a lot of that. And those are the influences kind of converging together. Example 111. You'll hear something here that's very common. There's that tritone substitution, but it's with a different voicing. Augmented tritone substitution. So if you hear this, doom, and you don't have to add that 7 unless you want it to be bluesy. You could just add, or the 9. So you see that? There's a 7 playing. Example 112 is another common voicing that you will hear. You can hear this in, for instance, the song "The Battle Is the Lord's" on Yolanda Adams' song, on the "Save the World" disc. Anyway, you hear this voicing. The left hand, you have the 3rd, the 7th, and the key of C. So there's a 3rd, the 7th, and the 9th. The right hand, 2nd inversion. See how that's voiced? Very common. So let's take a look at 84, this example. I'm trying to use a lot of these in some teaching examples just to make you familiar with the sound. 112B. There it is right there. This one, chromatic. See that? Listen to it again. Here it is. Deceptive. Sharp 11. Add 9. How can I end it like that? Let's try that one again. See what happens there, and you could just add your own stuff in there. I like that B flat diminished 7, add 9. 112C. See how that's used? See what happens there? And that's the one we were talking about. right there. That's how you use that. It goes to the 1/7. That's the function of it.